This had so many teething problems during its design and testing, it was nearly cancelled. It went on to help the Allies win during the fierce fighting after D-Day.
In March 1937, aviation technology was progressing so quickly that Hawker's chief designer, Sydney Camm, started sketching out a replacement for the Hurricane before it had even gone into mass production. A year later, the British Air Ministry set out exactly what they wanted next in Specification F-18/37. They required a single-seat interceptor that could operate at high altitudes and reach speeds of over 400 miles per hour. Reaching that speed called for a huge leap forward in propulsion. The specification called for an experimental next-generation power plant capable of producing at least 2,000 horsepower from 24 cylinders. The aircraft also needed to deliver devastating firepower. Rather than a standard set of machine guns, the Air Ministry insisted the aircraft be armed with 4 20mm Hispano cannons. This is the machine Hawker built, the Typhoon. To accommodate those heavy cannons, ammunition and fuel, Camm designed an exceptionally thick wing. Forcing a massive experimental engine and heavy weaponry into a single high-speed airframe demanded severe aerodynamic compromises. Those very design decisions meant the Typhoon would fail its primary mission before it even left the ground. This cross-section shows the Typhoon's NACA 22 wing profile. Compared to a standard interceptor wing, the frontal volume is enormous, providing the rigid platform needed for the 20mm cannons. But at high altitudes, that thick profile created immense parasitic drag. As the aircraft approached 400 miles per hour in the thin air, compressibility effects caused extreme buffeting, crippling the plane's climb rate and limiting its ceiling. The aerodynamic limitations were made worse by the power plant. The Napier Sabre engine used a complex 24-cylinder H-block configuration, essentially 2 flat 12 engines stacked vertically and geared to a single propeller shaft. The Sabre was incredibly unreliable. In cold conditions, it refused to start. In flight, the chrome molybdenum sleeve valves frequently deformed and seized, leading to catastrophic engine failures. The engine also leaked lethal carbon monoxide directly into the cockpit. The fumes were so severe that pilots were forced to breathe through oxygen masks even during routine ground tests. Sluggish in thin air, heavily reliant on constant maintenance, and toxic to operate, the Typhoon failed completely as a high-altitude interceptor. The aircraft's aerodynamic flaws became lethal during steep high-speed dives exceeding 500 miles per hour. The turbulent airflow struck the rear of the aircraft, causing a harmonic vibration known as elevator flutter. This rapidly induced extreme metal fatigue in the rear fuselage joists. Under this stress, the entire tail assembly could tear clean off the aircraft in mid-air. This structural failure killed several pilots, including Hawker's second test pilot, Ken Smith. Desperate to keep the remaining planes intact, engineers riveted crude rectangular metal fish plates directly over the transport joints to reinforce the tail structure. By late 1941, the combination of seizing engines, toxic cockpit fumes, and deadly structural failures brought the Air Ministry to the absolute verge of scrapping the entire program. Just as the Typhoon faced cancellation, the Luftwaffe introduced the Focke-Wulf FW-190. The new German fighter easily outperformed the Royal Air Force's frontline Spitfire Mark Vs, securing a decisive advantage in air-to-air combat. The Luftwaffe capitalized on this superiority by executing tip-and-run raids. German pilots would cross the Channel at ultra-low altitudes, bomb industrial targets along the southern English coast, and immediately speed back out to sea. The Spitfires were optimized for dogfighting in thin air. Down at sea level, they could not generate the speed required to catch the German raiders before they escaped. The RAF found itself outpaced and highly vulnerable at low altitudes, with no immediate solution in their frontline fleet. The aerodynamic penalty of the Typhoon's thick wings, which ruined its performance in the thin atmosphere of high altitudes, was far less severe in the dense, heavy air at sea level. Down on the deck, the brute force of the massive 2,000 horsepower Napier Sabre engine finally overcame the drag, driving the heavy airframe to incredible speeds. Operating right above the ground, the flawed, nearly cancelled Typhoon was the single aircraft in the British arsenal capable of running down an F-190. The RAF rushed the aircraft into frontline service. Squadrons 56 and 609 were deployed along the coast, intercepting the tip-and-run raiders and putting a stop to the low-level German attacks. The very engineering decisions that ruined the Typhoon's original purpose as a high-altitude interceptor inadvertently created the perfect machine to counter Britain's most desperate airborne threat. By late 1942, commanders realised the Typhoon had a secondary advantage. The same powerful Napier Sabre engine that caused so many mechanical failures produced over 2,000 horsepower, enough to carry massive external loads. Ground crews started fitting heavy racks under the wings, arming the aircraft with 2 1,000-pound bombs. This transformed the Interceptor into a heavy fighter bomber, leading the British press to give it a new nickname, the Bomphoon. The armament was further developed when engineers added 8 unguided RP-3 rockets to go alongside the 420mm Hispano cannons already built into the wings. With this particular weapons setup, the aircraft found its true calling. It was no longer chasing enemy fighters, it now operated as a dedicated low-level tank buster. The sheer weight of ordnance it could carry changed the RAF's capabilities. They shifted from defending British airspace to actively crossing the Channel, seeking out and destroying ground infrastructure in Europe. By June 1944, as Allied forces launched Operation Overlord and landed on the beach of the Normandy, the Typhoon was ready for its most crucial mission. The Royal Air Force deployed 26 squadrons of Typhoons specifically to support the Allied invasion forces advancing inland. To maximise their effectiveness, the RAF employed a tactical doctrine known as the cab rank. Typhoons would circle in a vertical holding pattern directly above the battlefield. On the ground, RAF radio operators embedded with the advancing infantry used VHF radios to relay precise coordinates to the circling aircraft. The lowest aircraft in the stack would break formation, dive onto the target and unleash its rockets. Within minutes, German armour or supply lines were destroyed, and the next Typhoon in the pattern would drop down ready to strike. This reached a devastating climax at the Falaise Gap, where Typhoon squadrons trapped retreating German armies, decimating their convoys and preventing an organised withdrawal. But flying continuous low-level ground attack missions exposed the aircraft to intense overlapping fields of light flak and small arms fire from concealed defensive positions. The human cost was severe. During the 4-month Normandy campaign alone, 151 Typhoon pilots were killed and another 36 were captured. The Typhoon proved that on-demand close air support could break heavily fortified ground forces, but it also established a grim reality. This type of warfare required an enormous, unavoidable sacrifice of young pilots. Following the breakout from Normandy, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower stated, "The chief credit in smashing the enemy spearhead belonged to the rocket-firing Typhoons." Yet despite this high praise, the arrival of early jet aircraft meant the heavy piston-engine fighter was almost immediately obsolete. Over 3,300 Typhoons were rapidly scrapped. Today, only a single intact survivor remains on display in a museum. Decades later, a quiet resurrection's taking place. 2 separate teams, one in British Columbia rebuilding airframe JP-843 and another in the UK restoring RB-396, are working to return the Typhoon to the sky. The engineering challenge is immense. With few parts in existence, teams are scavenging fragments and using surviving factory drawings to reverse engineer and manufacture exact replacements. This includes the highly complex effort to restore an original Napier Sabre engine to airworthy condition, requiring modern engineers to master the same intricate mechanics that caused so many failures in 1942. These restorations are driven entirely by volunteers, historians and public donations, operating without the backing of massive corporate aerospace budgets. For these teams, rebuilding the complex machinery is a means to an end. They are constructing an active flying memorial, ensuring the specific sacrifices of the pilots who flew the Bomphoon remain visible to history.